You need that income stream so that you are not feeling desperate. That desperation, it can even creep into your writing. It can affect the kind of content you're putting out, because I said this a lot. Confidence shows, and clients are always going to be attracted to that confidence.
What does it really mean to be a thought leader in B2B? That's what we're here to find out. This is the Notorious Thought Leader, a podcast for B2B marketers who want to generate demand by creating content that builds credibility and thought leadership. In each episode, Erin Balsa helps demystify thought leadership and uncovers how companies are using thought leadership to generate demand. Let's get started.
My guest today is Chima Mmeje, founder at Zenith Copy, where she helps SaaS and tech brands with SEO content strategy and writing. Thanks for being here, Chima.
Thanks for having me, Erin.
Of course, I'm so excited. So I first met Chima about 2 years ago on LinkedIn, hit it off right away. Soon after, I was doing some keyword research for one of my clients, and I Googled a super competitive term. I think it was something like SEO copywriting services or even just copywriting services. And guess what? I saw Chima's business website, Zenith Copy, in the #1 organic position. And I was like, holy shit, this woman knows her stuff when it comes to organic. Take a look at her site. Take a look at all the different search terms that she's ranking organically from. She's definitely someone you want to follow and learn from. So when Chima's not busy dominating the SERPs and, speaking at conferences and podcasts, she's running the Freelance Coalition for Developing Countries. And that's a nonprofit that provides learning resources and mentorship for BIPOC freelancers who need help upskilling and learning the business side of freelancing. So thanks for being here again, Chima. I'm really excited to dig into your journey from content mill writer, which I'm sure a lot of listeners can relate to. A lot of us start writing for pennies a word. I know I kind of started there too. I think my first freelance article back in the day paid $30. You went from content mill writer to six-figure business owner. But first, before I kind of dive into those questions, I want to ask you the same question I ask everyone who comes on the podcast. And that is, WTF is thought leadership?
Are you allowed to swear?
Of course.
You're saying WTF like you can't say what the fuck, so I'm wondering.
You can swear, Chima. My podcast is rated explicit. It's one of the few podcasts on thought leadership that is actually explicit.
Okay. So, I gave this a lot of thought because in the past, when I think of thought leadership, we just think of influencers. On the basic level, that is what thought leadership is. Influencers that we listen to and that we take more seriously than everyone else. That is who they are. But if you really deep it, thought leadership are people who share their professional expertise with other people in the same field. So you can have thought leaders in marketing, you can have thought leaders in paper making, you can have thought leaders in car making, you can have thought leaders in the sex industry. A thought leader can be anywhere. As long as they are sharing unique expertise related to their field that answers questions better than everyone else and do it consistently, that is thought leadership. And it doesn't just have to be an individual. I think that's another misconception we have, that thought leaders are individuals. No, thought leaders can also be companies. Companies that have proven themselves worthy over years of creating content around that topic that they're trying to establish thought leadership on. So, for example, you can have HubSpot, you can have Content Marketing Institute, you can have, I'm drawing a blank here, any industry blog that you go to for news or for content around that niche, that is a thought leader. It's not just an individual, it's also companies.
So I'm double clicking on two things which stood out to me: sharing expertise with the word expert in it, and proving themselves, because it's not about sharing expertise one time. It's about sharing expertise again and again,
consistently.
So that you prove yourself. That's a really, rational, reasonable definition, and I support that. So thinking back to 2017, you were a writer in a content mill. What was that experience like? Like, what was your day-to-day like?
Okay, so I used to wake up at 2, 3 a.m. every morning and then I would write until like 5:30, go out for a run, come home at 8, 9 a.m., rush up to my day job because I also had a government job. And then in between doing my boring government job, I would do more writing and then come home at 6, do some more writing until 8. I go to bed at 8 like a 90-year-old and then wake up at 2 a.m. again. Now, this content mill had us writing 4,000 words 5 days a week and then 2 Saturdays or Sundays every month. So we had the Monday to Friday, and then we also had to work one weekend every month. So calculate that. I ended up writing, like, the least I think I ever wrote was 88,000 words in a month. And
88,000 words in a month.
88,000, and the highest I ever wrote was almost 100k, like 99 something. Let's say 100,000 words in a month.
Wow.
And then it was such a toxic place because that's what content mills are. They are slave traders, and you are bragging about writing 8,000, 6,000 words a day. You're bragging about putting in labor and breaking your back and all of the pains that your body goes through because they've taught you to think that extreme hard work is how it's supposed to be. Right. So it's a very, very like fucked up mindset when you really think about it. And I did that from 2017 August until April 2019. Yes.
Wow. So that's wild. Waking up at 2 a.m. to write thousands of words, to work all day at your government day job, and then to write thousands more words, go to bed at 8 p.m. like an old lady in your 20s, right? And then do it all again. In my 20s.
I'm just going to say this here, that no human being, it is unnatural to be awake at 2 a.m. No human being should be awake at 2 a.m. I used to fight with my body to just get out of bed and then get into work mode at that unholy hour of the morning. It was brutal. Fucking brutal.
That is brutal. So I listened to this podcast. It's called The Business of Authority. And there's two hosts, there's Rochelle and Jonathan. And they talk a lot about exactly what you were saying, how there's this misconception that we're meant to just drive ourselves to the bone. And that's kind of a moniker of success. I'm working my ass off. Look at me. I'm so productive. But truthfully, especially those of us who are self-employed, we leave our employer and we maintain that employee mindset, right? So we think if we're not tied to the desk with our fingers typing to the bone for at least 40 hours a week, we suck. We're not productive, right? So it's kind of like rethinking, relearning a new mindset, a new way of living. A lot of the most successful people, they're not working their fingers to the bone 60 hours a week. You know, they are finding ways to work more efficiently, to scale themselves, to operationalize things so that they're not working their fingers to the bone. And then we have these content mills who, like you said, it's very abusive. Out of curiosity, do you remember what they were paying you for writing, 100,000 words a month?
Yeah, that's another thing. They will pay you in your local currency so that they don't have to pay you in like USD or pounds or whatever. This company was based in the UK. And if you convert it, we're earning around $500 a month.
500 like US dollars?
500 US dollars a month to write 100,000 words, which is insane, which is why I call them slave riders. And then it went up to around 900 in the last year when I was living. So 2017, 500. The next year went up to 600. And then in the year after that, went up to 900. So... and it was just insane. I don't think there should be any human being, not even someone who is even taking pictures as a job, should be paid 500 a month for doing that much work.
Yeah, that's really awful. So what was there like an inflection point where you actually like said, what am I doing? I need to find a better way. And what was that inflection point?
Okay, so that's the thing. Yeah, it's always interesting because I say this repeatedly that if you don't have a viewpoint or a different perspective, then you don't know that there's something that's supposed to change. So I'm in this place, earning 500, and I think this is the best. I think it doesn't get better than this. In my mind, this is how good it gets. There's nothing else out there because I had never seen anything else until I joined this group on Facebook called the Copywriting Club. And in this group, I never forget, there was this lady, Hilarious Presswood. They were talking about how much people charge for blog content. At the time, she was charging 500. She doesn't write copy anymore. She's more like a position strategist or something. But then she was writing copy, and she said she was charging 500 for a blog post.
And who is this? Do you remember this person's name?
Yes, Hilary West.
Okay, I'll make sure I put the name on the show notes for anyone that wants to connect. And
yeah, and I'm looking at, my mind is like blown because she's charging 500 for a blog post at the time, and I'm charging 500 for a whole month's worth of content. That moment right there, that was when I knew something was wrong. And I'm looking at the rest of that thread. There are people charging 1,000. There are people charging $1 per word. People charging $2. Somebody is charging $5 per word for content. Someone is talking about making 50K a month. And I'm just, I remember taking the rest of the day off to think about my life because I was like, nah, something has to change. And then the next week, I reach out to this guy I know, a friend who is a web developer. I pay him $100 and he builds my first website for me. It's crappy, it's ugly, but you know what? It's my first website, and that is when I started thinking of getting out of that content mill.
Wow, that's really impactful. And, you know, I have mixed feelings about talking about money, and I'll tell you why. I didn't know anyone rich. I didn't know anyone that drove a luxury car. I didn't know anyone that had luxury bags. So for me, like, money wasn't a thing I thought about or talked about in my life until I got older, into my 20s. And I started becoming aware that some people had money and nice things, and it's like a whole new kind of world to me. So I have kind of a complicated relationship with money myself. For a long time, I worked in education. I worked in kind of social work. So I did not make a lot of money, and I worked a lot, you know, like full-time job, making a fraction of what my friends were making. We all went to business school with me. I took the education path. They took the business path. I was here. They were here financially. So I have a complex relationship with money. I've had to really kind of get out of my own head and learn to get comfortable with, I do have the right to earn this amount of money. I am worthy of this, right? So that's where I come from personally. And I struggle because I know that some people aren't there yet. And when I want to, you know, share money, I want to talk about salary and money because, like you said, if that conversation doesn't happen, people don't know what could be possible. But at the same time, yes, I struggle because I don't want it to come off like I think I'm so great and I'm bragging. And I really worry too about making someone feel less than. And I'm like, if I share what I'm making, who am I really destroying their day and making them feel like a piece of shit? And I don't want to be that person. So how do you feel like about that?
Okay, this is a very, very, very good point. This is probably going to be the best point we talk about in this entire discussion. Now, I'm going to go back and say I grew up poor. I think people assume that when they see you successful, they don't think about the before.
Right.
I grew up dead poor, shit poor. I grew up in the Longo. I grew up having nothing. I grew up with, like, I want people to imagine what nothing looks like when you grow up in Nigeria. It is worse than nothing when you grow up in a country like America or any part of the West. You grow up with nothing in Nigeria. There is no healthcare. There is no benefit. There is nothing. You just have nothing. That is how I grew up. So, coming from that background, where you grew up in poverty, there is a poverty mindset. You grow up with this poverty mindset of lack. And then you become an adult and you are still in poverty. In fact, I don't think people realize this. I've never said it before, but I did not come out of poverty until 2017 when I became a copywriter. That was when I came out of poverty. I came out of poverty in 2017. Count that back. That's 5 years ago.
Right.
So imagine, I've only been out of poverty for 5 years. So prior to that, I was living in a deep poverty mindset where every penny from the moment I got my paycheck had to be accounted for. There was nothing for extra. So I'm just setting the scene here to explain the fact that I probably even have a worse relationship with money than you. Because
oh, for sure, I get that.
I grew up without it. Now, when you grow up without money, when you start touching money, you have anxiety when the money comes in. All of my siblings who are doing well now, we still struggle with this. You have this anxiety that it can be taken away from you. So because you have this anxiety, it doesn't allow you to enjoy the money or to live in the moment. And then you always feel like you have to justify this money that you're getting to yourself and to the client. And because you feel like you always have to justify it, you end up undercharging.
Yes.
And because you're constantly undercharging, you're in this perpetual circle of lack where you are living paycheck to paycheck because you are afraid of what comes next. So this is very deep. This took a lot of unlearning. It took a lot of seeing people lay claim to what they say they deserve. That is actually what really helped. I would see all these people on the internet charging a lot of money for stuff that I was basically doing. And I'm asking myself, why does this person get to charge this much and I'm charging $150 or $100 for content? And it's the same quality of content. And it's that gradual process of hearing people talking about money that helped me to start charging my worth. So while I have this poverty mindset, while I have this trouble with money, it even gives me a deeper understanding of the importance of being open about money conversation. I probably spent the whole of 2021 documenting my journey online, documenting going from charging 100 to 200 in 2020, getting mentorship, which is why I started the coalition, and then going up to 600, and then going up to 900, and then going up to 1.5, that whole process, documenting it, and then making my first 100K, because it's so important for me as a content writer who was living in Nigeria and making that much money, because there are other people like me in poverty who didn't even think that it's possible to make 50K a year, or
Right.
it's possible to make 100K a year. And now 2022, a lot of them are charging 900, are charging 1,000 plus. A lot of them are doing 10K modes. It's now normal. But that was because they had someone like me who was open to talk about money, because that pricing conversation keeps coming up. And I keep telling them, you're going to have to learn to say no a lot so that you can open yourself up to better offers. You're going to learn how to stand your ground. You're going to learn how to reject that poverty mindset and then take what you deserve, because you are just as good as the people who are creating content in the US. You're just as good as white people. There is no other. You are just as good as them, but it is on you to demand it. So it's them seeing me as this person who is standing in the limelight and doing something like that. Because if they did not have that, someone who looked like them, someone who has experienced that, then there's no example. So that's why it is even more important when you've come from poverty, when you know what that feels like, when you live that as your life experience, the moment you get out, you start documenting so that others who are still trapped in that mindset can start to use you as their own example of what is possible. I hope all of this rubbish I just said makes sense.
It all makes sense. I love it. You're basically saying that it's fine to talk about money, and especially if you can be a role model to others like you, because you've climbed out of poverty and you can talk about your journey and you can be that role model for others, which I totally, I love that. So for those of us who feel a little uncomfortable still, like, do you feel like there's any recommendations for like people that are like me that want to not make people feel uncomfortable but still want to like show people what's possible, even though we have not walked the exact same journey in the exact same shoes? I
think if you notice this 2020, so I haven't really talked about money this year because I think I've achieved what I wanted to achieve in 2021 by talking about it consistently. So 2022, I stepped back from that. I think it comes from, why are you talking about money? That's the thing I always have to tell myself. Am I talking about money to brag? Or am I talking about money to inspire? You can usually tell when people are about money to brag, they want to attract other people that have that mindset of wealth. It's kind of like a magnet. They're doing it to attract maybe clients who pay well. They're doing it usually it's because they want to sell something, if I'm being honest. When people spend all their time on social media or their website just talking about money and how much they make, at some point there is a product coming on how to make the same money that they're making. That is usually the goal. But if you're talking about money to motivate, it will show in the content that, oh, this is where I was and this is where I am now. It can be done. So you see there's a difference. You're not just saying, because in 2020 there were a lot of people who just kept on talking about, oh, I wasn't hit by the pandemic. Here, celebrating with, I made 220K by the end of 1 or 2 months. I felt that was insensitive, because you had a lot of people who had been laid off. You had a lot of people who were struggling to eat, you know. In fact, it was probably my worst year. And then you have these people who are just talking about money because they want to sell you a course on how they made 220K in 6 months. So you see, that's the difference. It's just about your mindset. Why am I talking about money? Am I talking about money to inspire other people? Or am I talking about money to gloat? If you know that difference within yourself, then I think that's what helped me, because I also struggle with that at some points. I also struggle with the guilt. I'm trying to make people not to feel bad or not to rub it in their faces, but instead to make it come across as, oh, this is me trying to inspire. So I felt like the moment I achieved that goal, I stopped talking about money on social media.
Okay, I can relate to that. So talking about inspiring, let's kind of like transition to the next part of the conversation, which is all about inspiring listeners. So for those listeners who are still stuck in the grind of the content mill, what is your advice to them? What could they do, something actionable, tactical, practical today to start changing their destiny and their future?
Okay, I think the first thing you need to do, you need to have a second source of income. That's the first thing. That was what really helped me to say no, because to get out of that rut and to step into your greatness, you need leverage that allows you to say no. For me, that was the government job, because I knew that anyhow it was, I would have income that month. So it allowed me to say no to a lot of shitty gigs. It allowed me to scale, because you can't scale when you're hungry. I don't think people understand that. When you're hungry, you will take what is in front of you, because survival instinct kicks in and you just stay in that survival mindset. That you can't grow in that place. So that would be the first thing. You need to have some sort of leverage, and usually that is another type of income. Now, you have your other type of income. I think something I did was to leverage social media in the early days, because you're not going to get search ranking quickly. That takes time. That takes years, if I'm being honest. So first thing, start creating on social media. It's something I tell them in the community. Build in public. For example, we had the first cohort this year, and immediately they started lessons. I told them to start sharing what they were learning in public. Build publicly. It builds authority, because it shows people that I know what I'm talking about, and I'm not just talking to my anus. Then, as you're building in public, share results. That's something that I think a lot of us who are Black people struggle with. I don't know, we just feel unworthy of the results we are creating. We think everybody else is doing the same thing, but everybody else is not doing the same thing. So that's something I always do. I share results. If I jump on a call with a client and I feel like I provided value for them based on a mistake that I saw in their strategy, I share that publicly so that everyone can learn. And it's also a great way to build authority. So use social media to build authority quickly. Now, another thing I would advise is to find your niche quickly. I know it takes time. I know this is like probably one of the toughest decisions we have to make as freelancers, but the faster you can niche down and say this is what I want to do and for whom, the more quickly you can build authority and establish yourself among those people. When creating content, please use a cluster approach. I cannot even say enough how helpful it is to think within clusters when creating content, rather than just creating content randomly. I hope that helps.
That does help. I'm just gonna kind of summarize what you said. I friggin' agree, because this is all the shit that I did when I was starting too. So my first job, I was very lucky that I shouldn't say I was very lucky. I did work really hard, but I had a second source of income as well, just like you did. So I used to have a day job, and I worked in education, and I'd come home from my 9 to 5, actually my 8 to 4, and I used to spend like 3 hours a night writing on my personal blog. And I honestly enjoyed it. It was an outlet for me. I wasn't making extra money, but I knew I was doing it for a reason. I wanted to show the world that I had this ability to tell stories, right?
Yes.
And so one day I'm at the friggin' hair salon getting my hair done. I'm reading my little local city magazine, and I'm like, oh, they're looking for an assistant editor. Like, I think I could do that. I never had written professionally. I had no published writing samples, but I had this blog that I'd been building for almost a year. And I emailed a link to the editor, and that was how I got my foot in the door with my first job ever.
Exactly.
That said, you know my story, I think. I met my husband on an airplane. I quit my awesome job as a magazine editor. It was awesome because it was fun. It paid horrible. I made $35,000 a year, but I loved it. So it was good. I was getting a lot of skills, which is important. But I quit my job to freelance with only 1 year of professional experience. And I didn't know what I didn't know. But luckily, I had a second income stream. By that point, I had already worked in education for a decade. I had bought a house on my own. I was still single at the time. And I was able to rent out those rooms on Airbnb. So I ran my house like a hotel so that I could freelance. And I was not making good money back then. I would luck out occasionally and get like something in Boston Magazine that would pay like 90 cents a word, but I was pitching. There's only so many magazines that will, accept pitches. I wasn't making a lot of money, so thank God I had that second income stream. That was thing one that you said. You got to have that second income stream.
Yes, agreed. You need that income stream so that you are not feeling desperate. That desperation, it can even creep into your writing. It can affect the kind of content you're putting out, because I said this a lot. Confidence shows, and clients are always going to be attracted to that confidence. So, yeah.
Second thing you said, other than being able to say no to shitty gigs that want to pay you 1 cent a word, building in public on social media to build authority. I love that word, authority. And it doesn't mean that you're trying to be a thought leader. Don't try to be a thought leader. Share what you're learning. Like you said, share success. And I know there are some people in doing this really well, not all the time, but every once in a while, they'll share something that a client said about them. And they'll be like, hey, I'm so happy that I got this great feedback from my client. That looks so great as long as you're not doing that every time. And it just gives you that authority that says, if so-and-so says I'm doing a good job, I am doing a good job, and the world should see that, right? So I think that's really important too. And then niche down, that's a tough one. That's the one that I had the hardest time with myself.
Agreed.
And tell me if you felt this way. Coming from, again, like who I was as a person, the way I grew up, I struggled to think I was smart enough to do certain kinds of work at first. So I thought I was destined for like that magazine kind of type content, lifestyle, beauty, travel, eating out. And I'm like, oh yeah, I could never do like this technology. And then it kind of just so happened, I was in a full-time role at an agency, and I got put in charge of the team that would write all this content. And I started editing all this content and talking to all these clients. And I became really passionate about technology and SaaS. And I'm like, oh shit, I can do this. Like, it was just a wall that I had put up for myself. And once I dipped my toe into that pool, I realized not only could I do it, I could be really great at it. And I think that's a tough thing when you're first choosing a niche, because you're probably going to choose the thing that's less scary. And that's going to typically be the thing that's not going to pay as well. Right?
I have to agree with you there, because again, it's still something that happens with a lot of black and brown skinned people. We choose the easiest thing because it's what has the least barrier to entry. And then you end up making piece pay money because you're generalizing and doing it for everybody. But the moment you decide to specialize, and then you find this small group of people to do it for, it's scary because you think you're limiting yourself and you're letting go of all these other fishes in the sea. But you're actually positioning yourself better to be seen by more people who need what you do. So again, even the whole idea of picking a niche is mindset. It's mindset to not see it as scarcity, but to see it as abundance.
For sure. I totally agree. And just to kind of reiterate for people listening, you're not going to be open to every opportunity once you pick a niche, but some people will see you and they're more likely to want to hire you than others because you understand that industry vertical, that niche, and that is important. And I would say two things. Definitely know that you want to work towards a niche. You don't have to pick it right away. And you want to also have an open mindset that things that might seem too scary, just know that it might not. Give it a try. Believe in yourself, right? I think that's really important advice to give to people listening.
Agreed.
Okay. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I wanted to talk about SEO content and the whole bucket mentality. So I have talked about this recently on LinkedIn, and the way I see things, people tend to view and talk about content in buckets. So you have your SEO content, you have your thought leadership content, you have your product-led content. And, it makes a lot of sense because we want to help our clients understand our strengths and we want to differentiate ourselves so that clients realize like, oh, this person is who I go to if I need my content to rank, or this person is who I go to if I need, someone to conduct an interview and create this kind of content, but I personally, I see some pros and cons when it comes to thinking about content in buckets. And I'd love to kind of get your take. What are some pros and cons, in your opinion, when we as content marketers speak in these bucket terms?
Okay, so I need you to explain, what does that bucket really mean?
Well, what I have inferred through all of my time spent talking to people and spending time on social media and hiring people and seeing resumes, SEO content means, when they use the term SEO content, shitty content. They use it to say, oh, I don't want to create SEO content because that's shitty content, because it's the kind of stuff that the content mills pay writers abusive rates. And they're like, oh, just pump out as much as you can. I've even met companies that have two content teams. They have their in-house content team who's interviewing experts. They're writing the thought leadership content. They have an outsourced SEO agency who's just writing stuff without really doing any legwork. And they actually don't put that content on the blog. They hide it on a separate part of the site. And it's designed just to kind of build up some domain authority by ranking for these keywords. But it's so fucking bad that they won't put it on the blog with the rest of the thought leadership content. So that's what I mean when I talk about these terms, and that is my perception of what these buckets mean.
Burn.
Right? The fuck?
I keep saying burn because this is what we used to do when I worked in a content mill. You just called out every single content mill that exists on the face of this planet Earth. So this is what they used to do then. A client is trying to rank for a big keyword, but they don't want to spend money on link building or creating authoritative content. So what they do is that they do like a knowledge base. So all of that shitty content goes on the knowledge base. What is this? How many types of this? Blah, 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 that. And then everything is on knowledge base. None of it goes to the blog because they don't want everybody to see it. They just want to hide that so-called knowledge base for search engines. But you know what? That shit actually works. It works because they interlink within the knowledge base and then interlink to the content on the website, and they use that knowledge base to provide link juice to the website. So it actually works. I'm not saying do that. I'm just saying it is what a lot of people do. So yes, in terms of that, now at the core of it, product-led content, SEO content, and what was the third thing you said? Thought leadership content. They are all content. They are all to educate. Product-led content is supposed to be a style of storytelling where you explain a point, but you use the product as the hero in the story. That is actually product-led content. Authoritative content, like I said initially, thought leadership content is answering questions basically, and then sharing your experience, your expertise with your audience. SEO content gets a bad name because people assume it's content that is supposed to be gimmicky and trick search engines, but that's not true. SEO content, which I do, is supposed to be thought leadership. It's supposed to be content designed to help the user satisfy search intent so that they don't go back to the search engines to look for another result. They are completely satisfied by what they've just read. In my opinion, that is SEO content. So if you look at it this way, they are all interconnected. Product-led content can also be SEO content. Thought leadership content can also be SEO content. They are all one and the same. You start to have a distinction when you try to play games and when you try to do some sort of underhanded method to create this content, or where you have people who are outsourcing thought leadership content on social media to some random LinkedIn marketing agency. And then that's when you start to see all that rubbish content that they're creating on LinkedIn that nobody actually believes is true. Or when you start to see brands making up case studies because they want to they want you to think that their product is good, even though it's shitty. And then they are weaving all these lies as case study, and everybody's reading it on LinkedIn. Same thing with SEO content. They can all have bad names, but if you really think about it, all of them are content. Thought leadership content is content. Product-led content is content. They can all exist on your blog, and you can still take that, break it down into granular subsections, and then use that to create social media content. So that what is feeding your blog in across these 3 levels is also feeding your social media strategy. And that's how you actually build like holistic authority.
I love the word holistic. I think that's important for people to hear. Holistic. I've actually moved away from using those terms because of what they mean. And I used to think of content in buckets, like, oh, your SEO content sucks because they're not even trying. They're just whipping it out with no care for the reader experience. And that's hurtful to the writers who are writing really good, helpful content that is designed to rank. So I kind of got away. I stopped using those terms, and I'm just saying content designed to rank in search, content designed to build credibility and thought leadership, content that helps companies, show how they can use the product to solve problems. There's just better ways, in my opinion, to describe content so that we're not demeaning certain types of people that are creating certain types of content, and so that we're...
I disagree with you there.
Oh, that's
I disagree
cool.
Because
that's great.
Because you've just split it down into 3 different things, and I'm saying that they are all the same thing. Content designed to rank in search assumes that it is written for search engines, and I'm saying that content can be authoritative, content can be product-led, and still be optimized to rank in search. It doesn't have to be one or the other. They can all be the same thing.
No, you're not disagreeing with me, actually. I love that you are. I love when people disagree, but we're saying the same thing. You're just hearing me differently. I actually have a model that I shared where there's like a sweet spot for content is doing all. It's holistic, because that's actually my favorite kind of content to create. I love to create content that accomplishes all 3 at the same time in the same piece. Because like you said, it's not one or the other. It's not like, oh, you're authoritative. Oh, you're talking about the product. Oh, this one's to rank. They're not buckets. If you're using a content calendar, project management software, you're not like using a drop down that says, this blog is SEO. This blog is thought leadership. It's just not. It's all of those things, because content needs to be holistic.
Yes, agreed.
So leads me to my next question. How do you, I know you're amazing at content briefs and content clusters, and that's your thing. How do you approach creating this holistic content? Content that's designed to do more than just rank. Content that's designed to also accomplish all of these holistic goals.
Okay, so there's the first stage, which is the planning and the research. Then there's a second stage, which is the writing. And then there's a third stage, which is the optimization. So it all begins at the first stage. And I think that's where all the hard work goes into. If you get it right at the first stage, the rest is easy. The rest is really easy. The first stage is understanding what are your goals. Usually for bootstrapped SaaS founders, they want more traffic, they want to build authority, they want conversion. So it's finding those keywords that allow you to do those things. And that's where keyword research comes in. So you're looking at long tail keywords with less competition. You're looking at keywords at the middle and the bottom of the funnel. And then you're defining, does this need to be a landing page? Does this need to be a product page? Does this need to be a blog post? And then you're taking all of that and then you're putting it into a list. Then you're collecting feedback from sales. What are the questions they keep getting recurrently? You're looking at competitor data. You're also looking at reviews. You're taking all of these things and then you're using them to feed into what is going to be your content. So you have all of these keywords and then you cluster them. Very important, like I keep saying, cluster them, because then it makes it easy to organize and it makes it easy to link between all of these content pieces that you're creating. You cluster them and then you start from the bottom and make your way to the top. So now it's time to build the briefs. You build the briefs, and then I think I always say this, I brag with my briefs because they are so great, so great.
I've seen them.
Yes, everything that's going to happen after the content is already happening in the brief right there, right down to the internal links, the external links, all of the on-page optimization. I like to put all of that stuff right there in the brief. So the brief is where all the magic happens. Starts with the headline. I'm looking at What other sort of heading am I seeing on SERP? Because I'm a big fan of looking at patterns. Google already has a determined way of, will I say, looking at what's going to rank. So I want to look at SERP and see, okay, what type of headlines are ranking? Are they numbers? Are they questions? What type of questions am I seeing repeatedly? I use that to write the headline. I'm not deviating. I like to include some sort of added benefit. For example, can we add a downloadable plan? Can we add a downloadable checklist? What can we give as an offer to make people more likely to click on this content? Once we have the headline, then we have the meta description. The meta description is basically like a small ad copy for me, encouraging people to click on it because of this or this reason. Once we have that, then I'm thinking internal and external links. What are the internal links that we want to link to? If you're thinking in clusters, then it's easy because you want to link to the rest of the cluster. You also want to link to other pieces outside this cluster that are related to the content you're writing on. I put all of that in one list. External links, I'm looking at competitor content. Is there some sort of stat they keep referencing? Is there some sort of authority they keep referencing? That means I need to reference that person. I'm also thinking as I'm writing this content pieces, the H3s, what statistic am I going to need to bolster this and give it more credibility? Who do I want to talk to that has thought leadership or has great eats on that specific subheading that I can ask to give me some sort of quote to make this more authoritative? Put that in there. Then comes the hard work of creating the H2s, H3s. You have tools like Phrase, Market Muse, and the rest of them that can help you do this. I specifically like Market Muse because Market Muse forces you to think of every H3 like a topic of its own instead of starting from the top. Every H3 is like a topic. So you have questions that you want to answer within every subheadings. And when you have those questions, it ensures that the writer who is writing that content doesn't deviate. They are just going to stick to answering every question for that H3. So you have that H3, you have the questions that you want to answer for the H3s, and then at the end of all that, you have semantic entities. Entities are words that basically explain what those topics are about, and it also makes it easier for search engine bots to crawl the content and know how to rank that content pieces. The more entities you can put in the content, the more secondary keywords that page can rank for. So I have all of these entities that I've gotten from Market Muse or from Phrase or from ClearScope. Any of these tools, you can use them to get entities. But I also like to use tools like TextRazor, especially if it's a keyword that Wikipedia is ranking for. Extract those entities and then optimize the content for them. The idea is to do it naturally by reading the entity list before you even start writing, so that when you start writing, you can think of how to naturally insert those entities in the content. Now, you have this content, you have your statistics, you have the quotes, you pull all of them together, you write that content pieces, and then you publish. After publishing, I like to wait a couple of weeks until search bots have indexed the content. I want to see the keywords that page is ranking for on its own. Obviously, it's not going to be on page 1, it could be on page 2, page 3, but I want to see all the keywords that they've indexed that page for. I'm going to use those keywords to start building internal and external links so that I have diversity when I'm link building, whether it's internal, whether it's external. And then we promote. That's it.
So I know you bucket into 3 different parts in the planning, the writing, the optimization, and you believe that the planning is really where people should be investing the bulk of their time and effort.
Yes. Everything happens in the planning. Everything happens in the planning. If you get the planning right, and then you give that the great planning leads to a great brief. And when you give that great brief to a good writer, everything is already like finished from there.
This has been great. So I believe you have a course. Is that correct? Do you still have a course that you offer on SEO?
Yes. I offer a course on building topic clusters and then selling them. So yes, I do have a course. It's called the 10x Topic Authority course.
10x Topic Authority course is available on zenithcopy.com, and I'll also put a link to your website and your course on the show notes on my website. This has been awesome. We're running up on time, so before we hop off, is there anything else you would like to say to the listeners, or anything else that you wanted to talk about, promote?
I think I've already promoted the 10x Topic Authority course. Get the 10x Topic Authority course. It's a great way to think about content. It's a great way to think about strategy. In fact, I think it's the best way to get into content strategy, because it forces you to think in terms of clustering and then building authority instead of just creating content randomly. But also check out the nonprofit freelancecoalition.org. We provide training, mentorship, scholarships for Black and brown skin people, not just freelancers, anybody who is Black and brown skin, based anywhere in the world. You can come in and then you can enjoy the benefit. There's always something to gain from our community.
Love it. I'll also link to the Freelance Coalition website for anyone who's interested. Chima, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure chatting as always, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Notorious Thought Leader. If you're looking for more stories from marketers who are generating demand from thought leadership, then visit us at motionagency.io/notorious. See you next time.